In the shadowed fringes of the whispering woods, where the ancient pines whispered secrets to the wind, Ilara Thorn trudged through the underbrush, her bare feet numb against the frost-kissed earth. The moon hung low, a silver sickle mocking her from the sky, illuminating the tattered remnants of her life. She was 22, an Omega in a world that devoured the weak, and tonight she had nothing left. No pack, no home, no illusions. The rejection still burned in her chest like a fresh brand, the Alpha's words echoing in her mind. "You're worthless, Ilara, a burden we can't afford." Her former mate, Kale, had cast her out after marking another, a stronger she-wolf from the rival Silverfang pack, sealing Ilara's exile with a public humiliation that left scars deeper than any claw. She clutched the thin shawl around her shoulders, the only possession she'd been allowed to keep, woven by her late mother's hands. The fabric smelled faintly of lavender and regret, a ghost of the warmth she'd once known in the Moonshadow pack. Ilara's dark hair, tangled and matted from days of flight, framed a face pale with exhaustion. Her emerald eyes, usually bright with quiet defiance, were dulled by hunger and the relentless ache of betrayal. Omegas like her were meant to serve, to submit, but Ilara had always felt a flicker inside, a spark that set her apart, though she'd buried it deep, fearing what it might mean. The woods thinned as she crested a hill, revealing the sprawling valley below. There, nestled against the jagged peaks of the Eldritch Mountains, lay the heart of the Ironclaw territory. The pack's lands were legendary, ruled by the Alpha King himself, Thorn Blackwood, a name that struck fear into enemies and loyalty into his wolves. Whispers among travelers spoke of his unyielding strength, his golden eyes that could pierce souls, and the iron rule that had unified fractured packs under one banner. Ilara had heard the tales during her time as a lowly servant, how Thorn had risen from the ashes of a brutal war, forging the Ironclaw into an unbreakable force. But legends didn't feed the starving or shelter the rejected. Desperation had driven her here, following rumors of sanctuary for outcasts, though she knew the risks. Border patrols were merciless. Intruders were either enslaved or slain. As dawn's first light bled across the horizon, Ilara stumbled into a clearing marked by towering oaks etched with territorial runes. Her breath came in ragged gasps, and she collapsed against a moss-covered rock, the world spinning. That's when she heard it, the low growl rumbling through the trees, followed by the snap of twigs under heavy paws. She froze, heart pounding like a war drum. Emerging from the mist was a patrol of 3 warriors, their forms shifting seamlessly from wolf to man. The leader, a burly beater named Garrick, with a scarred muzzle and eyes like chipped flint, stepped forward, his hand already on the hilt of a silver dagger. "Who dares trespass on Ironclaw lands?" Garrick's voice was gravel, laced with suspicion. His companions flanked him. Lena, a lithe tracker with fiery red hair tied back in braids, her nose twitching as she scented the air, and young Thomas, broad-shouldered but wide-eyed, gripping his spear like a lifeline. They were the pack's outer guard, loyal to the bone, trained to sniff out threats amid the endless skirmishes with rogue wolves and human encroachers. Ilara raised her hands slowly, palms out, her voice a whisper cracked from disuse. "Please, I'm no threat. I seek asylum. My pack! They cast me out." She met Garrick's gaze, though every instinct screamed to lower her eyes. Omegas didn't challenge betas, but pride flickered in her chest, unbidden. Lena circled her, sniffing deeply. She reeks of Moonshadow, rejection scent all over her, and something else, wild, like untamed magic. Tomas shifted uncomfortably, his youthful face softening at Ilara's frail form. "She looks half dead, Garrick. Alpha's mercy might—" "Quiet," Garrick snapped, his eyes narrowing. "The king doesn't take strays, especially not Omegas with secrets. He grabbed Ilara's arm, yanking her to her feet with bruising force. She winced, but didn't cry out, biting her lip until it bled. As they dragged her toward the heart of the territory, the forest seemed to close in, branches like skeletal fingers brushing her skin. Ilara's mind raced. Had she made a fatal mistake? The Ironclaw pack was no haven for the broken. It was a crucible that forged warriors or crushed the weak. They marched her through winding paths lined with hidden traps, pits lined with stakes, snares that could snap a neck in an instant. The air grew thicker with the sense of pack life, wood smoke from communal fires, the tang of fresh kills, and the underlying musk of dominance. Ilara glimpsed wolves in the distance, shifting forms darting between cabins of sturdy timber and stone, their howls a chorus of unity that twisted the knife in her gut. She had once dreamed of belonging, of a mate who saw her worth beyond servitude. Kale's rejection had shattered that, leaving her adrift. At the edge of the central village, Garrick shoved her into a holding pen, a crude enclosure of woven vines reinforced with iron, used for interrogating rogues. "Wait here, outcast. The Alpha will decide your fate." Lena lingered a moment, her expression a mix of curiosity and pity. "What's your name, girl, and why run to us? Moonshadow's not far, plenty of wilds to hide in." "Ilara," she replied softly, sinking to the dirt floor. I had nowhere else. They said I was cursed, that my presence brought misfortune." It was half-truth. The spark inside her had always drawn suspicion. Small accidents blamed on her, fires starting unbidden, shadows twisting unnaturally. But she said nothing more, guarding her secret like a fragile flame. Thomas posted guard outside, his back to her, while Garrick strode off to report. Hours blurred into a haze of waiting, the sun climbing high, baking the earth. Ilara's stomach gnawed at itself, but worse was the uncertainty. Would they kill her outright, enslave her as pack drudge, or in some cruel twist force her into the Omega hierarchy forever beneath the strong? As evening fell, the ground trembled with approaching footsteps, heavy, purposeful. Ilara lifted her head, and there he was, Thorn Blackwood, the Alpha King. Towering at 6'5", his frame was a masterpiece of coiled muscle, clad in a simple leather vest that did little to hide the scars mapping his chest like war stories. His hair, black as midnight, fell in waves to his shoulders, and those golden eyes, fierce, unyielding, locked onto her with an intensity that stole her breath. He moved like a predator, every step commanding the air around him, betas bowing instinctively as he passed. Thorn stopped at the pen's edge, his presence a storm cloud, dark and electric. Garrick stood at his side, murmuring details, but the Alpha silenced him with a raised hand. He crouched, eye level now, studying Ilara as if she were a puzzle etched in stone. "You have courage, Omega, coming here, or foolishness. Speak your truth. Why should I let you live?" Ilara's pulse thundered, the spark inside her stirring for the first time in months, warm and insistent, as if recognizing something in him. She swallowed, meeting his gaze despite the fear clawing her throat. "Because I have nothing left to lose, Alpha, and maybe, just maybe, I have something to give." The words hung between them, a challenge unspoken, as the pack's watchful eyes turned toward the pen. In that moment, Ilara felt the first thread of fate weaving tight, pulling her into a world where rejection might yet bloom into redemption or ruin. Thorn's golden eyes narrowed, holding Ilara's gaze like a vice, unblinking and probing. The air in the holding pen thickened, charged with the raw power radiating from him, making the vines around them seem to quiver. She could feel the weight of the entire pack's curiosity pressing in. Wolves gathered at the edges of the village square, their whispers slithering through the twilight like smoke. Garrick stood rigid beside the Alpha, his scarred face a mask of disapproval, while Lena hovered nearby, arms crossed, her red braids catching the fading light. Thomas, still on guard duty, shifted his weight, glancing between his leader and the intruder with a mix of awe and unease. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs, but she didn't look away. The spark inside her, the one she'd always hidden, the flicker of something ancient and wild, pulsed warmer now, responding to Thorn's presence like a key turning in a long-forgotten lock. It wasn't fear alone that kept her silent. It was the strange pull, as if her very blood recognized him. "Something to give?" Thorn repeated, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the ground. He leaned closer, the scent of pine and earth and unyielding strength enveloping her. "Omegas like you come with empty hands and heavier burdens. Prove it, or I'll have Garrick drag you to the border myself." She swallowed hard, her throat dry as dust. The pen's dirt floor dug into her knees, a reminder of how far she'd fallen. Memories flooded her unbidden. The Moonshadow Pack's grand hall, where Kyle had stood before the elders, his arm around the Silverfang she-wolf, Lyra, her golden fur and fierce eyes making Ilara feel like a shadow. "She's weak," Kyle had declared, his rejection bite still fresh on Ilara's shoulder, a mark that burned now under Thorn's scrutiny. "She brings no strength, no heirs. Let her wander." The pack had howled in agreement, turning their backs as she was stripped of everything, her role, her dignity, even the simple necklace her mother had left her. "I was born in Moonshadow," Ilara began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs. "An Omega from the start, raised to heal and serve. But I see things others don't. Shadows that move on their own. Wounds that close faster under my touch." It was the closest she'd come to admitting her secret, the hidden power that had always set her apart. As a pup, she'd mended a littermate's broken leg with a whisper and a press of her palm, the bone knitting like woven thread. The elders had called it a gift from the moon goddess, but fear turned it to a curse, accusations of witchcraft when crops failed or rivals encroached. Kyle had used it as an excuse, claiming her unnatural ways tainted the pack. Thorn's expression didn't soften, but a flicker of interest sparked in his eyes, like embers catching wind. He gestured to Garrick, who unlocked the pen with a grunt, the vines parting like reluctant jaws. "Out," the Alpha commanded. Ilara rose unsteadily, her legs protesting the hours of confinement. As she stepped into the open air, the pack's stares bored into her. Some hostile, others intrigued. A few Omegas lingered at the fringes, their faces etched with quiet empathy, while warriors like Garrick eyed her as a potential threat. "Walk with me," Thorn said, turning toward the heart of the village without waiting for compliance. Ilara hesitated only a second before following, her bare feet padding softly on the packed earth path. The settlement unfolded around them, sturdy cabins clustered around a massive central fire pit where the evening meal was being prepared. The air hummed with life, children shifting playfully between forms, elders sharing stories under lantern light, and scouts returning from patrols, their pelts dusted with trail dirt. Old Mira, the pack's herbalist, a wiry woman with silver-streaked hair and hands gnarled like roots, nodded to Thorn as they passed, her sharp eyes lingering on Ilara with unspoken questions. They reached a secluded overlook, a rocky outcrop where the Eldritch Mountains loomed like silent guardians. Thorn stopped, gazing out over the valley, his broad shoulders tense. "Ironclaw isn't a refuge for the lost," he said finally, his tone edged with the weight of command. "We've fought too hard, against rogues, against the human hunters encroaching from the east. Every mouth we feed must pull its weight." He turned to her then, his gaze stripping away her defenses. "You speak of gifts, but I smell the pain of rejection on you. Mates don't cast aside what they claim lightly. What did you do to earn that?" Ilara's cheeks burned, the humiliation fresh as yesterday's wound. She wrapped her shawl tighter, the lavender scent grounding her. "Kyle, My alpha. He chose another, said I was barren, useless. But it wasn't that. They feared me, feared what I could do. The words tumbled out, fueled by the spark's insistent warmth. In a rush of desperation, she reached out, her fingers brushing Thorn's arm, where a faint scar peeked from his sleeve. An old battle mark, jagged and faded. Without thinking, she let the power flow, a soft glow unseen but felt, like sunlight piercing clouds. Thorn stiffened, his eyes widening fractionally as a tingling heat spread through the scar, easing an ache he'd carried for years. He pulled away, not roughly, but with a wariness that spoke volumes. "What was that?" His voice held a mix of accusation and wonder, the Alpha King unaccustomed to vulnerability. Before Elara could answer, a distant howl pierced the night, sharp, urgent, from the eastern border. Garrick burst from the tree line, face flushed. "Rogues, Alpha! A pack of them, scouting our traps. They're bold tonight, smell like they're organized." Thorn's demeanor shifted instantly, the storm cloud returning full force. He glanced at Elara, decisions warring in his golden depths. "You'll come with us. Prove your words in the field, or die with the intruders." It wasn't mercy. It was a test, raw and unforgiving. As the warriors mobilized, Lena tossing Elara a spare cloak and dagger with a grim nod. "Don't slow us down." Elara felt the spark ignite fully, a fire ready to consume or illuminate. The group plunged into the darkening woods, Thorn leading with predatory grace, his form half-shifted, claws extended. Elara trailed, pulse racing, the promise of action mingling with dread. Rogues meant chaos, blood, and the chance to show her worth, or expose her as the curse they'd always claimed. As branches whipped past, she wondered if this Alpha King, with his piercing eyes and iron will, could be the one to see her true power, or if he'd be the one to break her for good. The howls grew closer, echoing off the mountains, and Elara gripped the dagger tight, the night alive with impending violence. In the shadows, her hidden gift stirred, waiting for the moment to unleash. The forest blurred into a frenzy of shadows and snapping branches as Thorn led the charge, his massive form cutting through the undergrowth like a blade through silk. Elara struggled to keep pace, the borrowed cloak flapping around her legs, the dagger's unfamiliar weight heavy in her palm. Her bare feet, calloused from days on the run, pounded against the uneven earth, each step sending jolts of pain up her calves. The air was thick with the metallic tang of impending blood, mingling with the earthy musk of the Ironclaw warriors shifting around her. Garrick flanked Thorn on the right, his scarred face twisted in a snarl, claws extended and gleaming under the fractured moonlight. Lena darted ahead like a shadow, her red braids whipping as she tracked the rogue's scents, while Thomas brought up the rear, his spear at the ready, casting nervous glances at Elara. "Stay close, outcast," Garrick growled over his shoulder, his voice laced with disdain. "One wrong move and I'll gut you myself." Elara nodded mutely, her breath coming in sharp bursts. The spark inside her churned, no longer a flicker but a steady burn, urging her forward. It had always been there, this hidden power, a gift from the moon goddess her mother had whispered in bedtime stories before illness claimed her. But in Moonshadow it had been twisted into fear, blamed for every misfortune. Now, amid the chaos, it felt like an ally, humming in her veins, as if eager to prove itself. The howls intensified, a cacophony of feral challenges bouncing off the eldritch peaks. Thorn raised a fist, halting the group at the edge of a narrow ravine where the border fence, twisted iron woven with enchanted vines, sagged under recent sabotage. Below, in the moonlit hollow, 5 rogues prowled, mangy wolves with ragged fur and eyes wild with hunger. They weren't disorganized strays. These moved with purpose, one burly leader with a notched ear directing the others as they tore at the fence, exposing a gap wide enough for an assault. Their scents carried the rot of desperation. Starved loners turned marauders, likely driven from their own territories by famine or rival packs. "Flank them!" Thorn commanded, his voice a thunderclap that silenced the night. His body rippled, half-shifting into a hybrid form, taller, more lethal, with elongated fangs and fur sprouting along his arms. "Lena, Thomas, circle left. Garrick, with me. Omega, you watch from the ridge. Scream if they break through." His golden eyes flicked to Ilara, a brief storm of assessment before he leaped down, landing with earth-shaking force. She wanted to protest, to insist she could fight, but the words stuck. Instead, she scrambled to a vantage point behind a boulder, heart slamming as the battle erupted. The rogues whirled, sensing the attack. The leader lunged at Thorn, jaws snapping, but the Alpha King sidestepped with predatory ease, raking claws across the beast's flank in a spray of blood. Garrick barreled into another, their bodies colliding in a tangle of snarls and fur, rolling down the slope in a blur of violence. Lena's lithe form danced between two smaller rogues, her dagger flashing as she slashed tendons, forcing them to yelp and retreat. Thomas, less graceful, thrust his spear into a third, but the rogue twisted mid-air, clamping teeth onto his arm. The young warrior cried out, staggering back as blood welled, dark and sticky. Ilara's grip tightened on her dagger, useless from afar. The spark surged, a tidal wave crashing through her, demanding release. She couldn't just watch. Thomas was collapsing, the rogue shaking him like a rag doll. Without thinking, she vaulted over the ridge, cloak tearing on thorns as she slid down the embankment. "No!" The word escaped her lips, raw and unbidden, the power uncoiled like a serpent, invisible threads extending from her core. She reached Thomas just as the rogue prepared to finish him, her hand slamming into the wolf's side, not with force, but with intent. A pulse rippled outward, unseen, but potent. The rogue froze, its body convulsing as if struck by lightning. Its eyes widened in confusion, then terror, before it released Thomas and bolted into the shadows, whimpering as unnatural vines from the fence lashed out, ensnaring its legs and dragging it into the underbrush. Ilara dropped to her knees beside the injured warrior, pressing her palms to his mangled arm. Warmth flowed from her, golden and soothing, knitting torn muscle and staunching the blood. Thomas gasped, color returning to his face as the pain ebbed, his wide eyes locking onto hers in stunned gratitude. "What? How?" he stammered, flexing his fingers experimentally. Before she could respond, a guttural roar drew her attention. Thorn grappled with the leader, the two alphas locked in a brutal dance, claws rending flesh, fangs seeking throats. The rogue was massive, nearly matching Thorn's size, but slower, driven by rage rather than skill. It landed a blow, raking across Thorn's shoulder, drawing a line of crimson that soaked his vest. Ilara's spark flared in response, a protective instinct she couldn't ignore. She rose, dagger forgotten, and focused her will. The air shimmered faintly around Thorn, an aura only she could sense, bolstering his strength. His movements sharpened, fatigue vanishing as if renewed by moonlight itself. With a savage twist, he pinned the rogue, his jaws closing on its neck in a fatal crunch. The remaining rogues scattered, their leader's death breaking their resolve. Garrick dispatched one with a final swipe, panting heavily, while Lena pursued the last into the trees, her triumphant howl echoing. Silence fell, broken only by heavy breaths and the drip of blood. Thorn shifted back to human form, wiping gore from his face, his golden eyes finding Ilara amid the carnage. The wound on his shoulder knit slowly, faster than it should, thanks to her subtle intervention. He approached, towering over her, expression a mask of guarded awe. "You interfered," he said, not accusing but probing. Garrick lumbered up, eyeing the healed Thomas with suspicion, while Lena returned, wiping her blade, her curiosity piqued. "I couldn't let them die," Ilara replied, meeting his gaze. The spark hummed contentedly now, as if sated, but she felt exposed, vulnerable under his scrutiny. "It's what I am, A healer. More than that sometimes. The power. It repels threats, mends what's broken. I didn't mean to hide it. Thorn's jaw tightened, the scent of his blood mingling with the pine-scented night. He glanced at his shoulder, flexing it experimentally, the pain a mere echo. A gift like that could change everything, or doom us if it's uncontrolled. His voice softened fractionally, the storm in his eyes calming to embers. You've earned a night in the village, Omega, but tomorrow you show me the full measure of this power. No more secrets. As the group gathered their wounded and retreated, Elara walked beside Thorn, the distance between them shrinking with each step. Garrick muttered under his breath about witchery, but Thomas clapped her shoulder lightly, whispering thanks. Lena shot her an approving nod, the first crack in the wall of distrust. Yet, as the village lights flickered into view, Elara sensed the deeper currents, Thorn's lingering wariness, the pack's watchful eyes. Her rejection had led her here, but this power, once her curse, might bind her to the Ironclaw, or ignite a fire that consumed them all. In the quiet aftermath, as stars wheeled overhead, Elara wondered if the Alpha King's heart, armored as it was, could feel the pull she did, the invisible thread tightening, drawing them toward an uncertain dawn. But whispers from the woods hinted at more rogues, larger threats lurking, and her spark whispered back. The real test was just beginning. The village fire crackled like a living heartbeat as the warriors returned, their forms silhouetted against the leaping flames. Elara walked at the edge of the group, the borrowed cloak heavy with the night's damp and the faint metallic scent of blood. Thorn led the way, his stride unyielding despite the gash on his shoulder, now little more than a tender line beneath his torn vest. The pack's central square buzzed with murmurs, eyes darting to her, whispers slithering like vines through the crowd. Old Mira, the herbalist, emerged from her hut, her gnarled hands clutching a satchel of salves, but one glance at Thomas's arm, whole and unmarked, froze her in place. "Moon's mercy," she muttered, her silver-streaked hair catching the firelight as she shuffled closer, peering at Elara with eyes sharp as thorns. Garrick shoved past a cluster of onlookers, his broad frame parting the crowd like a plough through soil. "Clear out, nothing to gawk at here." But his gravelly voice held an edge of unease, his scarred muzzle twitching as he shot Elara a sidelong glare. Thomas limped slightly, more from shock than injury, clapping her on the back with a grin that split his youthful face. "You saved my hide, Elara. Never seen anything like it. Felt like warm river water rushing through me." Lena fell in beside her, wiping rogue blood from her dagger with a rag, her red braids disheveled, but her lithe form radiating quiet respect. Saved more than that. The Alpha's stronger for it, whether he admits it or not. Thorn didn't acknowledge the praise, his golden eyes fixed ahead as he veered toward the Alpha's lodge, a towering structure of weathered oak and riverstone, its roof peaked like a wolf's ears. The door swung open under his push, revealing a spacious hall lit by iron lanterns, walls lined with maps of territories and trophies from past hunts, antlers, pelts, a faded banner from the war that had forged his rule. He gestured for Elara to enter, the others halting at the threshold. "You two, report to the healers," he told Garrick and the rest, his tone brooking no argument. "Omega, inside. Now." She stepped over the threshold, the warmth of the hearth washing over her like a balm, chasing the forest chill from her bones. The room smelled of aged wood, herbs, and the faint, intoxicating musk that clung to Thorn, pine, earth, and something deeper, like storm winds. He closed the door with a thud that echoed her pulse, then poured 2 mugs of spiced mead from a barrel by the fire, handing her one without ceremony. "Drink, you look like death warmed over." His voice was rough, but there was no mockery in it, just the blunt honesty of a leader who'd seen too many battles. Elara took the mug, her fingers brushing his. A spark jumped, not her power, but something electric, intimate. She sipped, the honeyed warmth spreading through her empty stomach, steadying her nerves. "Thank you," she murmured, sinking onto a fur-draped bench as her legs threatened to give. The events replayed in her mind. The rogue's convulsing form, Tomas's grateful eyes, the way Thorn's wound had mended under her subtle push. She'd revealed too much, too soon, and now the weight of it pressed on her chest. "I didn't mean to interfere like that. In Moonshadow, using it got me labeled a curse. They said it drew darkness, that my touch poisoned the pack's luck." Thorn leaned against the mantel, his massive arms crossed, the fire casting shadows that danced across the scars on his chest. He studied her, those golden eyes peeling back layers she hadn't known she wore. "Curses don't heal warriors or turn the tide of a fight. But power like yours, it's a blade with two edges. I've seen gifts twist into weapons against us." He paused, flexing his shoulder absently, the motion drawing her gaze to the fading mark. The rogues tonight weren't random. That leader bore the scent of the Shadowvale clan, old enemies from the eastern fringes. They're probing, testing our borders. If they're massing, we'll need every advantage. Ilara's grip tightened on the mug, the mead turning bitter on her tongue. Shadowvale. She'd heard the name in Moonshadow tales, a ruthless pack that thrived on chaos, led by a beta named Draven, who'd clawed his way to power after assassinating his own alpha. If they were involved, this wasn't just a skirmish, it was the prelude to war. Her spark stirred uneasily, as if sensing the threat, warming her core with a restless energy. "I can help," she said, meeting his gaze. "It's not just healing. Sometimes I sense things, weaknesses in enemies, paths through danger. Like tonight, the vines, they responded to me, like the earth itself listened." A low rumble escaped Thorn's throat, not quite a growl, more like reluctant admiration. He pushed off the mantle, pacing the room with the caged energy of a wolf on the hunt. Bold words for an outcast who stumbled in with nothing. But I felt it, the pull when you touched me. It's old magic, Omega bloodline stuff. My grandmother spoke of it once, powers tied to the first packs, before the wars fractured us. He stopped before her, close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his eyes, the faint stubble shadowing his jaw. "If you're lying, if this is some Moonshadow ploy to weaken us from within, I'll end you myself. But if it's real, you stay, under my watch." The air between them thickened, charged with unspoken possibilities. Ilara's heart raced, not from fear, but from the way his presence wrapped around her, stirring that invisible thread tighter. Rejection had hollowed her out. But here, in this lodge, with the Alpha King's guarded trust, she felt the first stirrings of something alive. Hope, perhaps, or the dangerous bloom of desire. "I'm not your enemy, Thorn," she whispered, using his name for the first time, the word tasting like a vow. "Let me prove it. Train me, test me. I'll mend your wounded, shield your borders." He held her gaze a beat longer, the fire popping in the silence, then nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Tomorrow, at dawn, the training grounds. Garrick will drill you with the others, no special treatment." A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips, softening the iron lines of his face. "And eat something. Can't have you fainting mid-spell." As he turned to stoke the fire, Ilara exhaled, the tension easing just a fraction. But outside, the night's whispers grew, scouts' reports filtering through the village, tales of more rogue sightings, Shadowvale banners glimpsed in the mist. Garrick's mutters about unnatural witchery echoed in her mind, and Lena's nod felt like a fragile bridge. The pack watched her every move, loyalty divided between their king's command and old suspicions. She curled up on the bench as Thorn tossed her a blanket, the fur soft against her skin. Sleep tugged at her, but her spark hummed awake, visions flickering at the edges, dark shapes massing beyond the mountains, a howl that promised invasion. Thorn settled in a chair across from her, his eyes never fully closing, ever the sentinel. In that shared vigil, Ilara sensed the shift, the rejected Omega weaving into the Ironclaw's fabric, her power a beacon that could save them, or draw the shadows closer. Yet as the fire died to embers, a deeper fear gnawed. What if her gift demanded a price? What if saving the pack meant losing herself to the Alpha King's unyielding heart? The dawn loomed, heavy with promise and peril, and Ilara drifted into uneasy dreams, the thread between them pulling taut, unbreaking. Dawn broke over the Ironclaw village like a reluctant promise, painting the eldritch mountains in hues of rose and gold. Ilara stirred on the fur-draped bench in Thorn's lodge, the Alpha King's blanket still warm around her shoulders. The fire had burned to ash overnight, leaving a faint smoky tang in the air, but the chill seeped through the timber walls, urging her awake. She sat up, rubbing sleep from her emerald eyes, the events of the previous night crashing back, the rogue's frantic retreat, Thomas's healed arm, and Thorn's piercing gaze, equal parts suspicion and intrigue. Her spark hummed softly within, sated but alert, as if anticipating the day's trials. Thorn was already up, standing by the window with arms crossed, his silhouette framed against the rising sun. He wore a simple tunic now, the fabric straining across his broad chest, but the scar on his shoulder peeked through a tear, faint, almost gone, a testament to her touch. He turned as she moved, his golden eyes assessing her in one swift glance. "On your feet, Omega. Training starts soon. Eat this." He tossed her a strip of dried venison from a side table, the meat tough but nourishing, paired with a hunk of crusty bread. No ceremony, just the pragmatic care of a leader who valued strength above sentiment. Ilara caught it mid-air, her reflexes sharper than she'd expected, the spark lending her an edge. She devoured the food gratefully, the flavors grounding her amid the swirl of uncertainty. "Will the pack accept this? Me?" she asked, wiping crumbs from her lips. Garrick's grumbles echoed in her mind, and the villagers' stares from the night before lingered like shadows. Thorn's jaw tightened, a muscle ticking. "They follow me. Prove your worth, and they'll fall in line. Fail, and it'll be your neck." His words were blunt, but there was an undercurrent, something protective, like a wolf guarding a vulnerable pup. He opened the door, the morning air rushing in, crisp with dew and pine. "Come." Garrick waits. The training grounds sprawled at the village's edge, a wide clearing ringed by ancient oaks whose branches formed a natural arena. Dozens of Ironclaw wolves gathered, shifting between forms as they warmed up, stretching limbs, sparring in pairs, the air filled with grunts and the thud of bodies hitting packed earth. Thomas was there, shadowboxing with renewed vigor, his arm flexing without a hint of pain. He flashed Ilara a thumbs up, his broad face beaming. Lena lounged against a tree, sharpening her dagger, her red braids tied back, while old Mira observed from the sidelines, her gnarled fingers twisting herbs into poultices just in case. Garrick stood at the center, his burly frame a wall of muscle, scarred muzzle set in a perpetual scowl. A dozen warriors clustered around him, their eyes flicking to Ilara with varying degrees of curiosity and hostility. "Line up!" he barked, his voice gravel over stone. Thorn nodded to him and stepped back, arms folded, watching like a sentinel. Ilara joined the line, feeling small amid the towering betas and gammas, her borrowed tunic loose on her frame. The ground was cool under her bare feet, dotted with dew that soaked through quickly. "Basic drills first," Garrick announced, pairing them off for hand-to-hand. Ilara drew a young she-wolf named Sira, lithe and quick, with short-cropped brown hair and a smirk that screamed overconfidence. "Don't hold back, outcast," Sira taunted, circling her. "Heard you played healer last night. Let's see if you can dodge a real hit." The spar began in a blur. Sira lunged, fist aimed at Ilara's midsection. Instinct kicked in. Ilara sidestepped, the spark guiding her like an inner compass, and countered with a palm strike that connected solidly, sending Sira stumbling. Murmurs rippled through the group. Garrick's eyes narrowed. Luck. Again. They went 3 rounds, Ilara's movements fluid, her power subtly enhancing her agility without overt magic. Sweat beaded on her brow, but she held her own, blocking blows that would have felled her days ago. By the end, Sira rubbed her jaw, respect flickering in her eyes. Not bad for a Moonshadow stray. But Garrick wasn't impressed. He pulled Ilara forward, shoving a wooden staff into her hands. "Show us this gift of yours. Or is it just tricks in the dark?" The warriors formed a circle, tension coiling like a spring. Thorn's gaze burned into her back, expectant. Ilara's heart raced, the spark surging in response. She closed her eyes, reaching out with her senses, the way she'd done as a child, feeling the earth's pulse. The air hummed faintly, and she focused on a nearby sapling, its leaves rustling unnaturally. With a whisper of will, roots erupted from the soil, coiling around a practice dummy like living ropes, splintering the wood in seconds. Gasps echoed. Thomas whooped, while Lena leaned forward, intrigued. Garrick snorted, but doubt cracked his facade. Useful, maybe, but can it stand against real steel? He shifted partially, claws extending, and charged, not full force, but enough to test. Ilara didn't flinch. The spark blazed, weaving an invisible shield around her, the air shimmering like heat haze. Garrick's swipe halted inches from her face, his arm rebounding as if hitting stone. He staggered back, shaking his hand, eyes wide. "What sorcery!" "Enough!" Thorn interjected, striding forward. His voice cut through the murmurs, commanding silence. He placed a hand on Garrick's shoulder, steadying him, then turned to Ilara. Up close, his scent enveloped her, pine and storm, stirring that electric pull deeper in her chest. "It's no sorcery. It's power, like the old bloodlines." The pack shifted uneasily. Old Mira nodded slowly, her sharp eyes gleaming with recognition. "The moon goddess's weave," she murmured. "Rare, but true." As the drills resumed, Thorn pulled Ilara aside, leading her to a quieter edge of the clearing where wildflowers nodded in the breeze. "You did well," he said, his tone low, almost private. "But control it. The Shadow Veil won't wait for you to learn." His golden eyes searched hers, vulnerability flickering, a king unaccustomed to reliance. "Last night, when you healed me, it wasn't just the wound. It eased something deeper, scars I carry from the war." Ilara's breath caught, the confession bridging the gap between them. She reached out tentatively, her fingers grazing his arm, the spark flowing gentle as a stream. Warmth bloomed, easing the invisible burdens he bore, the grief of lost packmates, the weight of rule. Thorn's eyes softened, the iron mask cracking. "Ilara," he murmured, her name a rumble that sent shivers through her. The thread between them tightened, desire mingling with destiny, her rejection fading against this new flame. But the moment shattered with a scout's urgent howl from the tree line. Lena sprinted over, face grim. "Alpha! Riders spotted on the eastern ridge. Human hunters armed heavy. And that rogue scent. Shadow Veils mixed in, they're allying." Thorn's expression hardened, the king reclaiming his throne. He glanced at Ilara, decisions warring. "Your power, we'll need it. But if it draws them to us—" He trailed off, the unspoken fear hanging. Garrick rallied the warriors, Thomas grabbing spears, Sira shifting forms with fierce determination. As the pack mobilized, Ilara felt the spark roar to life, ready for the storm. The rejected Omega was no longer adrift. She was woven into the fight, her heart tethered to the Alpha Kings. Yet, as shadows lengthened across the grounds, she sensed the cost rising, alliances fracturing, powers awakening, and a bond that could save them all or shatter under the weight of war. The day had only begun, and the true battle loomed, hungry for blood and secrets. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the training grounds as the Ironclaw pack erupted into controlled chaos. Thorn's command rippled through the warriors like a shockwave, spears clattering and forms shifting in a blur of fur and muscle. Ilara stood frozen for a heartbeat, the spark inside her coiling tight, responding to the urgency in the air. The scent of fear mingled with determination, sweat, earth, and the sharp bite of oiled weapons. Garrick bellowed orders, assigning flanks. Thomas to the archers, Syrah leading a scouting pair, Lena vanishing into the tree line with her trackers. Old Mira hurried forward, thrusting a satchel of herbs into Ilara's hands. "Use it wisely, child," the herbalist whispered, her gnarled fingers lingering. "The old magic calls to you, but it hungers too." Thorn gripped Ilara's arm, his touch firm but not bruising, pulling her toward the eastern ridge path. His golden eyes locked onto hers, a storm brewing beneath the surface, worry for his pack and something softer aimed at her. "Stay by me," he said, voice low enough for only her ears. "Your power could turn this, but if the humans have Shadowvale allies, it'll be a slaughter, no heroics." The words carried a weight beyond command. It was trust, fragile and hard-won, wrapping around her like the cloak she'd borrowed. Ilara nodded, the spark thrumming in agreement, her emerald eyes meeting his without flinching. The rejection from Kale felt like a distant echo now, overshadowed by this Alpha's gaze, which saw her not as a burden, but as a force. They moved swiftly, the pack fanning out in disciplined waves. The ridge trail wound upward, rocky and steep, flanked by dense thickets where ambushes could hide. Ilara's bare feet navigated the terrain with surprising ease, the earth seeming to yield under her steps, guided by her inner hum. Birds fell silent overhead, the only sounds the crunch of boots and the occasional low growl from shifting wolves. Thorn led point, his hybrid form half-emerged, claws tipped with silver from old enchantments, senses heightened. Beside him, Ilara clutched the dagger Lena had given her, though she knew her true weapon lay within. The first sign of trouble came as a scout's frantic yip echoed from ahead. Lena burst from the underbrush, her red braids matted with leaves, face streaked with dirt. Humans. 6 riders, armed with crossbows and silver-tipped bolts. They're parleying with rogues at the creek crossing. Shadowvale stench all over them, Alpha. Draven's mark on their gear. Thorn's snarl vibrated through the ground, his muscles tensing like drawn bowstrings. Draven, the beta who'd betrayed his own pack, now rallying outcasts into a marauding force. Alliances with humans were rare, born of mutual desperation. The hunters seeking pelts and glory, the rogues craving territory. "Ambush them at the Narrows," Thorn decided, signaling Garrick to circle wide. "Ilara, with me to the Overlook, sense their weaknesses." She followed him up a jagged outcrop, the wind whipping her tangled hair as they crouched behind boulders. Below, the creek glittered like a silver vein, the riders dismounting amid a cluster of 10 rogues, mangy but coordinated, their notched ears and scarred hides marking Shadowvale loyalty. The humans, clad in rough leather and chainmail, laughed coarsely, one barking orders in a guttural tongue while unloading crates of ammunition. Ilara closed her eyes, letting the spark extend like invisible roots, probing the scene. Images flickered. The lead human's limp from an old wound, a rogue's hidden fear of fire, Draven's absence but his influence lingering like poison. "There," she breathed, pointing to a cluster of dry brush near the creek. "The rogues fear flames. Their fur's oiled for stealth, but it'll catch quick, and the rider captain, his legs weak, target it." Thorn's eyes widened fractionally, impressed before he signaled the archers. Thomas loosed the first flaming arrow, the shaft whistling through the air to ignite the brush in a whoosh of orange fury. Chaos exploded below, rogues yelping and scattering, their oily coats blazing as they thrashed into the water. The humans shouted, crossbows raising, but Garrick's flank crashed through the trees, spears thrusting. Ilara's heart pounded as bolts flew wild, one grazing Thorn's arm and drawing a thin line of blood. Without hesitation, she pressed her hand to the wound mid-leap, the spark surging. A warm glow unseen by others, sealing the cut instantly. Thorn paused, glancing at her with raw gratitude, his hand covering hers for a beat longer than necessary. "You're a miracle," he murmured, the words rough with emotion before charging down. The bond between them pulsed stronger, her power intertwining with his strength, like roots feeding a mighty oak. The battle raged fierce and short. Sierra downed two rogues with precise strikes, her cropped hair flying as she shifted mid-fight. Lena's dagger found a human's throat, silent and lethal, while Thomas parried bolts with his spear, his healed arm a blur. Garrick barreled into the captain, exploiting the limp Ilara had sensed. A crunch of bone echoed as the man fell, screaming. But not all went smoothly. A rogue beta, larger than the rest, with Draven's notched ear tattoo, lunged at Thorn from the shadows, fangs bared. It clamped onto his thigh, tearing deep, blood soaking the earth. Ilara cried out, the spark erupting unbidden. She sprinted forward, ignoring Garrick's shout of warning, and slammed her palms against the rogue's flank. Power flooded out, a convulsive wave that made the beast seize, veins bulging as if ice coursed through them. It released Thorn with a whine, collapsing in a heap, eyes glazing over in unnatural frost. Her gift twisting to repel, drawing from the creek's chill to freeze the threat from within. The remaining foes broke, humans fleeing on horseback, rogues melting into the woods. Panting, the pack regrouped amid the smouldering brush, the creek running red. Thorn rose, limping slightly until Ilara knelt, her hands glowing faintly as she mended the gash. Warmth spread, but so did something deeper, a connection, her essence brushing his soul, easing the war-weary scars on his heart. He cupped her face gently, thumb tracing her cheek, golden eyes softening to liquid gold. "You saved me again," he said, voice husky. "Not just the pack. Me." The admission hung between them, intimate amid the carnage, the thread binding them igniting into flame. Garrick watched from afar, his scowl deepening into reluctant acceptance, while Tomas and Sierra exchanged awed glances. Old Mira nodded knowingly, murmuring of prophecies fulfilled. But victory soured as Lena dragged forward a captured human scout, bound and bruised. "He talks," she said grimly. "Draven's coming himself, full assault at moonrise, and he's after something specific, the Omega with the light touch." Word spread from Moonshadow spies. Ilara's blood ran cold, the spark flickering uneasily. Kyle's betrayal had followed her, twisting her gift into a target. Thorn's arm tightened around her shoulders, protective, possessive. "They won't touch you," he vowed, the Alpha King's heart cracking open, revealing the man beneath. "We'll stand together." As the pack withdrew to fortify the village, the sun dipping toward peril, Ilara leaned into Thorn's side, the weight of impending war pressing down. Her power had saved them this day, but Draven's shadow loomed larger, threatening to unravel everything. The rejected Omega had found her place, her heart entwined with the King's, yet the true test awaited, one that could forge their bond unbreakable or tear it asunder in the moon's unforgiving light. Whispers of doubt stirred in the ranks, and Ilara wondered if her light could pierce the gathering dark, or if it would draw the wolves straight to their throats. The Ironclaw village thrummed with urgent energy as the sun dipped toward the jagged peaks, casting the settlement in a blood-red glow. Warriors hammered stakes into the earth around the perimeter, reinforcing the vine-woven barriers with sharpened logs and enchanted runes etched by old Mira's steady hand. The air buzzed with the clang of metal and low growls of determination, but beneath it all lingered the undercurrent of fear. Whispers of Dreven's name slithering through the ranks like smoke. Ilara moved through the chaos at Thorn's side, her emerald eyes scanning the preparations, the spark within her pulsing in rhythm with the pack's rising tension. The captured human scout had been dragged to the holding pen, his broken confessions spilling details of Draven's force. 20 strong, bolstered by human mercenaries, aiming to breach at the eastern creek under cover of night. Thorn's presence anchored her, his broad frame a shield as he barked orders, his golden eyes flicking to her every few moments. The touch from the ridge lingered on her skin, a ghost of warmth that stirred something deep and undeniable. A mate bond flickering to life, unclaimed but insistent. "Fortify the Narrows," he commanded Garrick, who nodded grimly, his scarred face set like stone, despite the reluctant respect he'd shown Ilara earlier. "Lena, Thomas, scout the high ground. Zira, ready the archers with fire arrows. No one rests until moonrise." The beta turned to Ilara then, his gaze lingering on the satchel of herbs at her waist. "And you, outcast? What's your plan when Draven comes for your light touch?" She met his stare, chin lifting, the spark lending her voice steel. "I'll stand with you, Garrick. Heal what I can, shield what breaks through." He grunted, unconvinced, but clapped Tomas on the shoulder and lumbered off, directing a group of gammas to pile boulders at the village's choke points. Ilara felt the pack's eyes on her, some wary, like Sira's quick glances laced with envy. Others curious, as old Mira's had been, murmuring of ancient bloodlines reborn. Rejection's sting from Moonshadow faded further here, replaced by a fragile belonging. But Draven's targeting twisted her gift into a vulnerability, a beacon drawing predators to the door. Thorn pulled her into the Alpha's lodge as the shadows lengthened, the door thudding shut behind them. The hearth blazed anew, casting flickering light across maps spread on the oak table, marked with red lines tracing Shadowvale's incursions. He poured her a mug of strong tea laced with energizing roots, his fingers brushing hers again, that electric spark jumping, making her breath hitch. "You don't have to fight," he said, his voice rough with the weight of leadership. But his eyes betrayed the man beneath, vulnerable in ways no battle scar could show. "I can send you to the inner caves with the elders and pups. Safe." Ilara set the mug down, stepping closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his chest. The air between them thickened, charged with the unspoken pull that had grown since her arrival, from wary assessment to this, a tether binding their fates. "Safe isn't what I came for, Thorn. You know that." She reached up, her palm pressing against his chest, where his heart thundered, the spark flowing gentle, easing the knot of anxiety coiling there. His breath caught, golden eyes darkening as the warmth seeped in, melting the iron walls around his soul. "I've run from rejection once. I won't hide from it again, not when I can save this pack. Save you!" A sharp knock shattered the intimacy, Lena bursting in with flushed cheeks and urgent eyes. "Scouts confirm it, Alpha. Draven's pack crests the ridge, torches in the mist, humans on horseback. They're chanting your name, Ilara, calling you the Witch Omega to draw you out." Thorn's embrace tightened fractionally before he released her, the king reclaiming his throne, though his gaze promised more later. "Positions, everyone. We meet them at the border." The pack assembled under the rising moon, a silver orb that bathed the valley in ethereal light. Ilara stood shoulder to shoulder with Thorn, the warriors forming a living wall, Garrick at the fore with his axe, Thomas knocking arrows beside Sarah, Lena melting into the flanks like a ghost. Old Mira chanted softly behind, weaving protective runes into the air that shimmered faintly. The ground trembled with approaching paws and hooves, Draven's howl piercing the night, a guttural challenge laced with malice. "Hand over the witch Blackwood, her powers mine by right. Moonshadow's gift turned traitor." Thorn's response was a thunderous roar, shifting fully into his alpha form, a massive black wolf with eyes like molten gold, fur rippling with power. The pack followed, howls rising in unity. Ilara, the lone human amid the shift, her spark blazing as she extended her senses. The assault crashed like a wave. Rogues leaping the barriers, humans firing bolts that whistled through the air. Garrick met the first wave head-on, axe cleaving fur and bone, while Thomas's flaming arrows ignited the underbrush, turning the narrows into an inferno. Ilara wove through the fray, dagger in one hand, the other channeling her gift. A bolt grazed her side, tearing cloth and skin. But she pressed on, palms slamming into a rogue's chest, power surging to freeze its limbs, sending it crumpling in a frost-rimed heap. Blood slicked the earth, cries echoing, but her light mended Thomas's fresh cut mid-fight, bolstered Syrah's strikes with unnatural speed. Thorn tore through the center, a whirlwind of fangs and claws, but Draven emerged from the shadows, a hulking grey wolf with notched ears and eyes burning with envy. He lunged at the Alpha King, their bodies colliding in a savage tangle, rolling across the bloodied ground. Ilara's heart seized as Draven's jaws clamped Thorn's flank, reopening old wounds. She sprinted forward, the spark erupting in a radiant pulse that rippled outward, repelling nearby foes like an invisible gale. Roots burst from the soil at her will, ensnaring Draven's legs, yanking him off Thorn with thorny grips that drew yelps of pain. The beta thrashed, shifting to human form, a scarred man with wild eyes and a sneer. "You think your tricks save him? Moonshadow sent me your secrets, girl. You're the doom they feared." Thorn rose, bloodied but unbroken, his golden eyes locking on Draven as he shifted back, claws extended. With Ilara's power lingering like a shield, he struck true, a fatal slash across the throat that silenced the beta forever. The Shadowvale force faltered, rogues breaking ranks as humans wheeled their mounts in retreat, the alliance crumbling without their leader. Garrick's roar chased them into the night, Lena's trackers pursuing stragglers. As the dust settled, the pack gathered around their fallen, few thanks to Ilara's interventions. Thorn pulled her into his arms, heedless of the blood and dirt, his lips claiming hers in a fierce kiss that sealed their bond, the spark weaving them irrevocably. Cheers rose, Garrick even clapping her back with a gruff nod, doubts dissolving in victory's afterglow. But as the moon climbed higher, a scout's distant howl warned of lingering threats. Draven's death might spark vengeance, not peace. Ilara leaned against Thorn, her power sated but watchful, the rejected Omega now the heart of Ironclaw. Yet, in the quiet triumph, she sensed the final shadow. Kael's spies, the true architect of this chaos, closing in from the west. The pack was saved for now, but the war for her soul and Thorn's heart raged on, demanding one last stand. The moon hung heavy and triumphant over the Ironclaw Valley, its silver light washing the blood from the earth like a cleansing tide. Ilara stood amidst the weary warriors, her body aching from the fray, but her spirit alight with the afterglow of victory. Thorn's arm encircled her waist, a possessive anchor that grounded her amid the pack's ragged cheers. The air still hummed with the echoes of battle, scent of scorched fur, the metallic tang of spilled blood, and the faint, acrid smoke from Lena's final volley of fire arrows. Garrick wiped his axe on a rogue's pelt, his scarred face split in a rare grin, while Thomas and Syrah clasped forearms, their wounds already fading under Ilara's lingering touch. Old Mira shuffled forward, her silver-streaked hair glowing ethereal, pressing a sprig of moonbloom into Ilara's hand. "The weave is complete, child," the herbalist whispered, her gnarled fingers warm. "Goddess's favor on you both." But the triumph felt fragile, a thin veil over the scout's warning howl that still lingered in Ilara's ears. Kael's spies, Moonshadow's venom, slithering from the west like shadows fleeing the dawn. Draven had been a pawn, his assault a distraction fueled by whispers from her old pack, twisting her gift into a prize to be stolen or destroyed. Thorn's golden eyes darkened as he scanned the tree line, his body tense against hers, the fresh mate bond thrumming between them like a shared heartbeat. "They won't stop," he murmured, lips brushing her temple, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers down her spine. "Chaol's pride demands retribution, but you're mine now, Elara. Ironclaw's heart." She nodded, the spark within her flaring in agreement, no longer a hidden flicker but a steady flame, intertwined with his strength. The rejection that had hollowed her out in Moonshadow was a scar now, healed by this king's unyielding claim. "Then we end it," she said, her voice steady, emerald eyes meeting his with the fire he'd ignited. The pack rallied around them, forms shifting restlessly, Lena's lithe shadow slipping toward the western paths, Garrick hefting his axe with renewed purpose. No one questioned her place anymore. Her power had mended their broken, repelled the dark, and in the ridge battle she'd turned the tide single-handedly. Whispers of Luna's chosen rippled through the ranks, Thomas beaming as he nocked another arrow. The western border loomed under a canopy of twisted oaks, their branches like skeletal fingers clawing at the starry sky. Thorn led the vanguard, Elara at his side, the pack fanning out in a silent crescent. The spark guided her steps, sensing the intruders before their scents hit the wind, familiar, bitter, laced with the lavender regret of her shawl's ghost. Moonshadow warriors, 5 strong, slunk through the underbrush, led by Chaol himself. He was unchanged, tall and broad, with the same cold blue eyes that had once marked her as worthless, now twisted with jealous rage. Flanking him were 2 betas, Ren and Vara, their fur matted from a hasty journey, and a pair of spies, sleek she-wolves who'd fed Draven her secrets for scraps of favor. Chaol's growl cut the night, low and venomous. "The witch returns to poison another pack? Hand her over, Blackwood, or we'll burn your precious Ironclaw to ash." His gaze locked on Elara, dripping with the old disdain, but undercut by fear, the fear of what she'd become without him. Thorn stepped forward, his hybrid form rippling with menace, claws glinting like silver blades. "She's no witch, traitor. She's our Luna, and you're trespassing on your last breath." The clash erupted swift and brutal. Chaol lunged at Thorn, their alphas colliding in a whirlwind of fangs and fury, bodies slamming against the oaks with bone-jarring force. Ren barreled toward Elara, jaws snapping, but Garrick intercepted, his axe swinging in a deadly arc that sent the beta sprawling, yelping. Lena danced through the shadows, her dagger finding one spy's throat in a spray of dark blood, while Tomas and Syrah harried the other, arrows pinning her flank. Vara circled Elara, shifting to human form, a wiry woman with cropped black hair and a sneer. "You were nothing, Omega. A curse we cast out. Now look at you, playing savior." Elara's spark roared, the air around her shimmering as she extended her will. Roots surged from the soil like vengeful serpents, coiling around Vara's legs and yanking her down, thorns piercing flesh. "I was never nothing," Elara said, voice calm amid the chaos, her palm pressing to the ground. Power pulsed outward, a radiant wave that bolstered her allies, Thorn's strikes landing with amplified force, Garrick's wounds sealing mid-fight. Vara thrashed, eyes widening in terror as frost crept over her skin, the spark drawing chill from the night dew to immobilize her. "You feared what you couldn't control. Now feel it." Chaol broke from Thorn, bloodied and staggering, his blue eyes wild as he charged Elara. "You belong to me. Your power was Moonshadow's." But Thorn was there in an instant, tackling him mid-leap, pinning the rival alpha to the earth. Elara approached, the spark weaving a final thread, not to kill, but to reveal. She knelt beside Chaol, her hand hovering over his chest, the glow faint but inexorable. Visions flooded him, the truth of her gift, pure and divine, not the curse he'd spun. His body convulsed, not in pain, but in shattering illusion, the rejection's lie crumbling under the weight of what he'd lost. Go! Thorn snarled, releasing him as the fight drained from Cale's form. Take your cowards and crawl back. Touch her again, and Ironclaw hunts you to the ends. Cale rose unsteadily, his betas dragging the fallen, their howls of defeat echoing into the woods. Moonshadow's shadow retreated, broken and exposed, the spies' betrayal laid bare for their pack to judge. Silence fell, heavy with release. The pack gathered, breaths ragged but victorious, Garrick clapping Thorn's shoulder with a nod that spoke volumes. Lena sheathed her dagger, smirking at Ilara. Knew you had teeth under that shawl. Old Mira chanted a blessing, the runes on the borders flaring bright, sealing the night against further threats. Thorn pulled Ilara close, his lips claiming hers under the moon's watchful gaze, a deep, searing kiss that sealed their bond eternally. The spark danced between them, mending the last fractures in his heart, his arms wrapping her like an unbreakable vow. You saved us all, he whispered against her skin, golden eyes shining with love unarmored. My queen, my mate, no more wandering. Ilara melted into him, the empty ache of rejection filled at last, her power a light that illuminated their future. The Ironclaw pack howled in celebration, a chorus of unity that shook the stars. Garrick raised his axe in salute, Thomas and Sira joining the fray of joyful shifts, Lena's laugh cutting through. As dawn crept over the eldritch peaks, painting the valley in gold, Ilara knew the wars weren't over, rogue remnants and human encroachments lingered, but with Thorn's heart hers and the pack's loyalty forged in her fire, they were unbreakable. In the quiet heart of the village, as the first light kissed the central fire, Ilara traced the scars on Thorn's chest, her touch a promise of endless healing. The rejected Omega had arrived with nothing, but her hidden power had saved the pack and claimed the Alpha King's heart forever. And in that embrace, under the whispering pines, their story wove into legend, a tale of redemption that echoed through the woods for generations.